Right. Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Good morning.
Good. All right. We'll hop in. I appreciate those of you that could make it this morning. We're having several just conversations, town halls around the reopening of school, and so wanted to do one in the early morning. We have several left for the evening, and I think a midday as well. So I believe Jenny Picard on our comms team has shared some information in the chat feature. Jenny, do you want to speak to that just to make sure folks are clear before we hop in?
Sure. So good morning, everyone. The way that this will work is that Dr. Johnson is going to give a presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer portion. And for the questions, you're going to enter them in the chat box and they'll come to me, and then I will feed the questions to Dr. Johnson. So just type your questions in the chat box for us and we'll answer them.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen here. So just to hop in, obviously, the conversation that everybody having, I believe, is across the country is the best way to reopen and restart schools. And we put this up for key considerations. Three things that we want to continue to elevate and think are important during this season. First is grace. We hope that the community shows us grace as we navigate these really uncharted territories, and vice versa. That we want to make sure that we allow grace to and for parents and community members as we try to navigate these waters together. Secondly, is choice. Something you'll see here in just a moment, but that we know is important to parents during this pandemic is obviously the ability to have choice, to make a determination as to whether or not you want to send your child back to school, or what you prefer to do HCS at home, or what you prefer, even thirdly, a virtual option. And then thirdly is the fluidity of this moment in time. And so when we use that word fluidity, what we mean by that is that things are ever changing. We were talking about yesterday how a week and a half or so ago we were at 950 cases in our community, and yesterday we were over 1,400. And so the information that we're receiving is constantly changing around the numbers and testing. I'll also note something here early on that we'll come back and note again later, is the fact that we know there are some specific medical questions and such that parents may have that we want to make sure medical professionals are available to answer. And so we'll have an upcoming one or two town halls where we have medical professionals available as well. Just kind of as I mentioned, when we looked at March 13th, if you can think way back to then, we never thought we'd be here, and we never thought we'd be in a situation we wouldn't return at the end of last semester, and definitely not in a situation where in July we're trying to figure this part out in regards to opening school. And just contextually, opening school is complex enough in our system with essentially 79 sites. And so this is definitely an additional variable that makes it more challenging. And to that end, we have to continue to adjust to what has become somewhat of a normal of the last several months, and we'll continue to navigate that. We value your feedback and your questions, your comments, your concerns. They have helped to guide us to this point, and will help to guide us going forward. And we'll continue to look at ways to engage. Expertise is always important to us, as I spoke. I think I say within the organization, but also outside of the organization, deferring to that expertise is critical. And then kind of as I mentioned, there's no playbook for this pandemic. There's a lot of guides around opening school in general, or how to start off a good school year in general, and all those things. But how to open up in the midst of a pandemic It's not something that's been, well documented, and not something that's out there. And every system, really across the country, is grappling with this and trying to build a playbook in real time. I think I've kind of shared, but you can just kind of see here, just kind of how cases have progressed, and the fact that this pandemic is real, and this was probably as of a couple of days ago, and even if you looked at as recent as this morning, or if you wait and update this afternoon, you'll see cases shift even more. But it's impacted our country, it's impacted our state, and obviously it's impacted our county. And so we are in a very fluid situation that's there. And to that end, with the situation being fluid, we thought it extremely important to defer to expertise and to bring our community together in helping us to make the determinations and the choices around how to reopen school. I want to be abundantly clear. Our senior leadership team has talked about this, a great deal. We obviously, number one, are concerned about the health and well-being of students and teachers and leaders, et cetera, that are involved in our system, and our school board is, as well. But make no mistake, we also are very concerned about the academic progress of all of our students. And when we begin to have the conversation, we also know that having our highly trained and skilled teachers teaching our students is the most impactful thing. So these four pillars are the conversations that that really Keith Fogelman, who's on the call, and Lieutenant Colonel Bill Brooks and Jim Bronson, who really led that reopening task force, really elevated on a regular basis, consistently throughout the process. How do we, remain mindful of health and the well-being of the whole child, and the importance of schools to our community, to our students, and making sure that operationally we're ready. This is kind of the timeline for how things, unfolded. We realized as really the school year was technically getting ready to close out in May, that this could be here in August. And what we wanted to make sure we were positioned to do is to have some type of framework together that parents in our community could refer to. And so this is just kind of the timeline of how things unfolded for us as we went about the work of trying to determine how to reopen schools. The reopening plan is broken down into these 6 categories, and really hits just about every area of our organization: the health and safety, academic, whole child operations, how we communicate, and then obviously the professional development piece, the reopening culture, and I would, put a bit of a pin on that, because, there are some things for teachers and leaders in schools that have and will look different as a result of this pandemic, and that will require support and training as we navigate it. I've kind of alluded to this, what the plan is and what it is not. It is a framework. There is a state board and state Department of Ed requirement that we have a continuous learning plan. And so this reopening plan, in large part, addresses all of the areas within the continuous learning plan. It is not a how-to document, and it is not something that's set in stone. It's, again, I'd go back to what I shared earlier about the fluidity of the situation. Things are ever changing, and because of those ever changing items and areas, we may have to adjust. And so we understand and know that, and are sensitive to that from the standpoint of our operations. And so it is not a set in stone or how to plan in regards to how we operate. And jumping into the feedback just a little bit, we had phenomenal participation with our surveys. We put out 2 formal surveys over the course of the last month and a half. And the first survey, we actually had over 25,000 respondents. The most recent survey, we had 20,000 plus respondents to it. And you can see the breakdown there. Over 75% of the respondents were parents, which is always encouraging, as and helpful to us as we have tried to take on this daunting task. And then, from the survey, you can see from the first survey to the second survey, just kind of the question around would you send your child back to school on August the 12th, and you can see the numbers there in regards to how many parents were sure in survey 1, and kind of how numbers moved in survey 2. Not significant differences, but you can see just a little bit that there were some that were more certain they were sending their children back to school. The I don't knows decreased some, and also the knows increased some. And so, we know that, like myself, you're trying to gain as much information as possible to make informed decisions. So to jump into the plan just a little bit, and phasing and gating criteria that we're leveraging. We have identified 4 phases, and I know we're going left to right, but if you'll start with phase 4. Phase 4 is everything is open, campuses are fully operational, and they will require a little to no mitigation. Phase 3 is that there's minimal spread, and maybe an isolated campus or on hybrid or remote learning due to an identified case. Phase 2 is that there has been moderate spread, and it's increasing, and that hybrid learning, we'd be in a hybrid approach where there'd be a group A and a group B. Group A would be with us on Monday and Tuesday. We do some advanced cleaning on Wednesday, and group B would be with us on Thursday and Friday. And then phase 1 is that there is significant spread and mitigation required, and all campuses are closed, and we move to remote learning as a district. And talking about the gating criteria a little bit, Keith and Colonel Brooks and Jen and the entire reopening team, we had the benefit of having medical expertise in our health department really to help guide us in regards to how we need to be looking at active cases, and helping us develop gating criteria. What we aspired to do here was to be very transparent with our thinking. I shared with the town hall yesterday, over the last probably 5 or 6 years, you all that have children and have had children in school know that somewhere around mid-October and December, sometimes on into January, when that flu season hits, we get the emails and the calls and questions about when are you going to close schools because of illness. And I don't know that any system has been overly clear about what the criteria is for that, and I think because of that, it leaves some question out there. And so, as we jumped into this situation, we said, really, as a result, let's try to be really clear with parents on things that we're looking at, but also, again, understanding that it is a fluid situation, and that things can shift based on some of the unknowns. So you see the gating criteria and kind of what we're looking at in regards to the active case count in our community. But the other considerations that I would point out is the average number of daily positive cases is something that we watch and monitor daily. The average daily number of hospitalizations will have impacts on our decisions, as well as the number of patients in intensive care due to COVID-19. So those are things that we look at, and then also the absences of teachers and students, and those are things that we will and traditionally have monitored very closely. I mentioned earlier that we had over 1,400 cases as of yesterday, and have been on a steady increase here for the last week and a half or so, as have as much of the country. And this is something that we continue to watch. And then yesterday we sent out a communication because a couple of weeks ago when we presented this to the board, we were in the lower part of phase 3 in regards to our cases. We have steadily increased and are on the cusp of being in phase 2 due to the number of active cases. And just as a reminder, that phase 2 would be a situation where we have students in Group A and Group B, and Group A would be there Monday and Tuesday, and Group B would be there Thursday and Friday. Wednesday would be an advanced cleaning day. And also, for clarity sake, we have some advanced cleaning steps that will be taking place throughout the course of that week, but there are some additional steps that we do on that Wednesday with our buildings clear. There was a question yesterday that came up, and I want to go ahead and address while I'm on this slide, there was a question about if we are in phase 2 and there's a group A and a group B, would we try to work to have siblings in the same group? And the answer to that is absolutely we would. And so there's some difference there in regards to that and working with parents. In regards to our health and safety plan, what we've learned from, the medical professionals that are out there is that, if you have asymptomatic, person that comes in contact with somebody that's uninfected, the chance of transmission is extremely high. And then obviously as you move throughout this continuum, it becomes a very low chance of transmission when you can allow for physical distancing and mask and such. And so, again, this is a broader community conversation around what we do to ensure that, we keep each other well and that we are able to, really live with what is a virus that has impacted us really significantly. And so you'll be hearing more about this. We shared this yesterday when we sent out the information in regards to where we are as far as the number of cases and such and how we're moving through the phases. But we really are going to encourage and ask all of our parents to make a pledge to commit to keep your child at home if they are sick, to avoid, getting too close to others and physical distancing and face coverings, as well as we do want everyone to really commit to this pledge so that we can keep our community safe and so that we can keep, obviously, our schools very safe. A lot of conversation about phases 2 and 3 and the requirement of masks. Obviously in K2, the requirement isn't there. It is recommended, but not required. We are taking some steps. No, the question comes up, and I'm sure will be asked today in regards to masks. Allowing time for students to be out of those masks and things of that nature. Just know absolutely that is something we will continue to work with schools on and know that is of real importance. And jumping to the academic plan, I've kind of talked about these 4 phases. I will point out option 2, and something we'll talk about here just a little bit more in a minute, is HCS at home. We heard again that over 30% of our parents, really desired in their feedback an alternative option from on campus. And we've always had a virtual option. We do feel that the HCS at home program is a stronger option because it will plug in our teachers in an even more intentional way than traditional with virtual programming being primarily self-paced. And so we decided to put together this option to hopefully meet the needs and desires of our parents. And just to give some visual context to phase 2, you can see the student in cohort A would be there Monday and Tuesday. All 5 days, just to be clear, are learning days. And we have an expectation that learning take place, but the way students would learn in cohort A is Wednesday through Friday, they'd be virtual. Student B, again, Monday through Wednesday would be virtual, then Thursday and Friday would be at school. And then obviously you can see HCS at home is a virtual option of which a teacher will be responsible. If you look right down the middle of this slide here, you can see that Wednesday is our enhanced disinfectant between cohorts. And again, everything that we read and understand is that, when you cohort students and group them, the chance of mitigation, decreases. And so obviously with the case uptick, we requiring us or resulted in us moving in phase 2, that would allow for us to do that even in a more intentional way. I've alluded to the number of parents, but from our second survey, as we put this HES at home option out, had over 30% of parents that said that is an option that I would be interested in as a parent. And so we want to be as responsive as possible to the needs of parents. And just, again, a little bit about what HCS at home allows. It allows a student to remain connected to the zone or magnet school. You can see there, I won't read this all to you, assigned to a homeroom teacher, technology devices provided. And so again, this is an option that we tried to put together in response to parents. And again, I want to be clear that we do feel that the ability to be face to face is obviously the optimal choice that we desire, but also know that and have sensitivity to the desires of families and want families to be able to make a choice. One of the other things that we heard from the spring is this was from teachers and also from parents. Some of the frustration, I guess, around trying to maintain passwords and usernames and for all the different resources that are out there for students and the teachers were pointing them to. And I think as parents were trying to log on, then they have to email the teacher back, and then the teacher would email, and just a lot of back and forth. And so we'll be acquiring a single sign-on. That's one username and one password. And once that one username and password is on, it will give the parent, the student access to all the resources within the district. It pulls up on the screen in an app-like format. The student or the parent will not have to re-log in to that particular resource. So again, that's based on the feedback, and glad we're able to respond. And then just some additional general information before we open up for questions. This is fluid, and data will absolutely drive what we do. There will be advanced cleaning Monday through Friday for high touch areas. In fact, we are going to have to add some custodial staff in order to support restrooms, high touch areas, soap dispensers, hand sanitizer dispensers and such. And then we'll take an additional step with disinfecting and misting, specifically hydrostatic misting for Wednesdays. We are working through the process. This has been a question that has come up in the next couple of weeks. We will communicate this. We're working through the process for any positive cases, which we've pretty much nailed down the positive case piece in regards to notification. We've had kind of the benefit, I guess, of having our school age child care operating throughout much of the summer. And have obviously had some lessons learned from that. Right, wrong, and different. We did have graduations, and there were a few sites that had positive cases. So we've been able to kind of work out some of the kinks in working with the health department and how we notify the public. A good learning experience there. And then on Monday, we started our REACH programs, which are very controlled numbers, students in masks and teachers in masks, and it's going, well, and obviously are learning from that. So we're kind of working the positive case, feel pretty good about where we are with that. Symptomatic students, we're also working on a process and procedure for that, and we'll follow CDC guidance, but we'll communicate that out to the public. If you select on campus, this is a question that comes up, and then circumstances change. So if you select on campus and at some point you're saying, I don't feel great about this, or I want to change for a particular situation or circumstance based on COVID-19, you can opt into HCS at home later in the semester. We do say that once you opt into HCS at home, that you remain for the semester, and the impetus for that is staffing. So we'll have to staff HCS at home, and then obviously from a safety and planning and support standpoint, it makes us stronger. And then just I hope something that brings some assurance to parents is that students in HCS at home are prioritized just as students are on campus. Anybody that opted for HCS at home, is not going to be forgotten about. Will be assigned, to a teacher or teachers, and we'll have that level of support. Every teacher in our district will get a PPE kit, and every school will get a COVID-19 supply kit. And the COVID-19 supply kit for schools will involve cleaners, barriers, dividers, dispensers, signage, etc. The PPE kit in classrooms will include masks, sanitizer, etc. to support the class level needs. And then again, we'll work through the building level needs. We'll provide some masks for any students that don't have them, and have a supply of those, and we'll continue to maintain a supply of those. Also, just to note that we're looking at the 12th, 13th, and 14th as orientation focus for families, probably with an A day on Wednesday, a B day on Thursday, and that Friday being a remote day. And the benefit of that is, one, it lets us navigate in. And this is obviously if we're in phase 3, it lets us enter in, but also it allows us really to get experience with all of our phases almost. And so we see a lot of benefit to that. Hopefully, these dates that are out there, we ask by July 22nd that selections are made in regards to what you want to do. And then again, just a reminder that we will absolutely, we know there may be some medical specific questions that parents want to ask, and we want to make sure that medical professionals are available to answer those, and we'll communicate those dates as we come. So just some general next steps. We started on yesterday, with a update to the public in regards to where we are, and we'll continue that. We are working on frequently asked question document that we anticipate having up by July 15th. Which is today, via the website, and then we'll launch the HES pledge next week. And again, I mentioned earlier the detailed procedures for positive symptomatic cases will be published by the 31st. And then looking at final decision for the reopening phase on August 5th. We have this framework that's in place now, and feel it's really important. We will hop into questions, here while we're here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. But the thing I would ask is, we would love feedback specifically around, as we look at the phasing and where we are. We do understand that, for parents, it creates difficulty and challenges. We can't be in a situation where we're flipping every single day in regards to the phases, and would love to just kind of hear your feedback in the chat, and we'll capture it, like what kind of cadence around phases, if we had to change phases, would make sense and work for you. We know the parents are planning around work schedules and such, and so is that so to put some context to that, if we were in a phase 3 and we it looks like we're trending towards a phase 2, how much lead time what you need as a parent to know that phase 2 is coming. And we've tried to begin to model that with having some conversation around that on yesterday and continuing that. And then once we're in phase 2, what would be your preference in regards to how long we stayed in that particular phase. And so just any feedback around how we maneuver through the phases, if you'll just pop that in the chat, we'll capture that as well separately as we work to communicate decisions around that over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. So Jenny, I'll open it up for questions now and turn it over to you.
Okay, so going off of what you just talked about with how much notice giving families between the phases and this is really a key question, can you talk about just transitioning between phases and what that looks like?
Yeah, so in regards to transition, so I'll use the example. So let's just deal with all of them. Phase 4 is one that, and I happen to see the front page of the newspaper today, and so I'm really hopeful, that there's some promise with a vaccine. I don't feel confident that we'll be in phase 4 at any point during the first semester. I don't feel confident that there'll be no cases and or limited cases. I think we go up to about 350 or 380. I don't know that we'll be in phase 4 at any point during the semester, but definitely hopeful that we will. So any shift from phase 4 to phase 3 is minimal. Okay, so phase 3 is isolated campuses. So school X has a student teacher with an identified case. Our process or procedure is going to be that we're going to close that campus immediately and notify the parents. We'll work with the health department. A minimum of 48 hours at campus is going to be closed. We'll immediately come in and do some cleaning, and then let the health department do their business around contact tracing. And then we'll really be deferring to the health department as to when it's appropriate to reopen. And so that's the kind of phase 4 to phase 3. It's going to be on isolated campuses. So not a ton of difference there. There could be some implications for after school activities and such, but that'll be based on the amount of spread and what we see. The phase 3 to phase 2 is where we'll be in groups, and so there's a group A and a group B, and I think, as I mentioned, with phase 2, group A would be Monday and Tuesday, and B would be Thursday and Friday, and school would be, and they'd be remote the other days. Those teaching and learning days we'd work to have as normal as possible. Obviously, with a reduced footprint in regards to the number of students, provides even more opportunity for distancing and safeguards, et cetera. And so we navigate that. And then phase 1, obviously, we're completely closed. And so just and kind of how we move through the phases, the numbers would determine that. I think one of the areas of feedback we want is how much lead time do you need to know that we're shifting into another phase. But that's kind of how we work through them and what it looks like. I hope that answered what the question was.
Our next question is, how will phases 2 and 3 be handled with Sequoia since it's a vocational school?
Yeah, it'll be the same. So phase 3, unless they have a case on site at Sequoia, it'll be open. In phase 2, they'll split into group A and group B, and so there'll be an A group and a B group, and it'll operate the same. Now we have and are in the process of using some CARES funding because we know there's a career vocational component that's very strong there, and so we have worked to acquire some online vocational programming that will allow our vocational programs to CT programs to continue, and that's really throughout the district. But yeah, phase 2 would be just like all of our other schools.
How much parent involvement will be needed for the 2 school at home options?
Yeah, so there will be a need for parental involvement, and so I would say this, that obviously some of that's going to be dependent on the age band of your child, and I'll use my 8-year-old. We would have to be very hands-on with him because of his age. Now also the understanding that we have the benefit of a teacher or teachers, depending on how it's organized at the school level, that are assigned to my student that I have access to, that's working with me and doing some direct instruction for my son. So there will be a hands-on, absolutely. There will be a hands-on need for a parent in regards to that. Now, if you have a high school age student, I think it just depends, right? So it depends on. Look, again, it's best to use my child because I don't want to put this on any of your children. But I had a high school age student year before last. We would have had to stay pretty aware of where she was because there's propensity to maybe kind of tell her she's a little further along than she really was, and we could be surprised at the end of the year. But again, it just really depends on your child and how they approach academic, the level of motivation, et cetera. And so I think that's a determination that you have to make as a family in that regard. But high school, I think you're positioned to have a little more opportunity to maybe obviously give them a little more freedom in regards to keeping pace.
What is the average amount of time students will spend on a screen during a day in the HCS at Home program?
So it's going to depend. It's going to vary, right? So there absolutely will be some instruction on the screen where they're getting that direct instruction from the teacher. There'll be a lot of opportunity at the individual home level to and depending on the resources, that determine if there are things that you want to print versus doing online. You know, your individual school can work with you on some, you know, if you don't have a printer, you say, I really want some of my items printed because I want to pull my child off the screen some. We can absolutely, you know, support some in that way as well. And so, you know, I think you'll have some flexibility in doing some of those kinds of things. But, you know, I would anticipate, you know, at least a couple, 3 hours on a screen a day, and it really could go up or down from there, really depending on, you know, just kind of how you approach it at the home level. I know, you know, if it were my child at home, I would probably print some things, but you know, and also it's just easier sometimes to go ahead and do some things online. So I think there's a mix there. And then, you know, we have put out some you know, some kind of suggested schedules of what it could look like. And obviously within there, you know, you would have opportunity to do, you know, some PE recess time and you know, some art things and things outside of you know, screen time that, you know, you continue to build in. So that's what I would anticipate.
So I have a follow-up question to that. If a family has more than one child, would each child need access to an individual computer?
That would probably be best, and we're going to do everything we can to help with that. And so, obviously, students in grade 6 through 12 all have devices. For our elementary grade band, if there's a selection for HCS at home, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that every child in HCS at home has a device and access to a device. We're also working on the back end for all our students on free and reduced lunch to, you know, try to acquire Wi-Fi access for them, because you know there's a dual issue with technology. One is the device, but the second piece is the ability to log on and connect. And so we're trying to work to make sure that we mitigate for both of those challenges.
The next question is, in HCS at home, will their interaction with teachers be live or just recorded lessons?
Yeah, so it'd be a little bit of both. So there will absolutely be some synchronous opportunity, you know, where you know the teacher is live, but then there would be some asynchronous resources that are available as well. And so we think it's really important to provide both. And you know, the great thing about this moment in time is it's given us a you know, really an opportunity to rethink how we deliver and support, you know, instruction to students. And so that's what we do.
If a child is in a future ready institute, can they do the HCS at home option?
Yes. So the HCS at home option is available to any student. If they are in a future ready institute, they could and would remain in a future ready institute when they, you know, eventually return to school. And you know, we would obviously, the school would be actively at the school level working to support any activities and assignments in alternative ways that were you know, that obviously look a little different than maybe the hands-on in the classroom. But we trying to determine ways, depending on the particular assignment, to provide that experience in a virtual way.
Our next question is, whenever school is closed because a case is identified, how will HCS at home work? Will it still continue through school? Sorry, let me rephrase this. The question is that when you're switching from, when you're closing the school because there's a case, will those students do HCS at home with the rest of their classmates while school is closed?
That's essentially what'll happen. You know, the students that have been on HCS at home will continue on HCS at home, and those students that are or have been on, you know, at on campus will transition to remote learning, which you know, will be very similar to HCS at home.
Our next question is, for middle and high school students, will they change classes or have access to their lockers?
Yeah, so we're working through some of those process and procedural things at the individual school level. You know, obviously we work with principals on obviously the CDC recommendations and guidelines, et cetera, and really trying to make sure that at the school level they've got plans and alternatives to really make sure that they mitigate against some of that gathering that just traditionally takes place in school, and really trying to make sure that we limit as much of that as possible. So absolutely that, and large spaces where folks usually gather. One of the questions that came up in another conversation is, at the start of school, in one of our schools, everybody reported to the cafeteria or the gym, or kind of commons area, and how do we mitigate against some of that from a procedural standpoint. So individual schools are working through that. Keith or Croner, you may want to add anything to that, or any conversations that I've had, or Justin. But we absolutely are thinking of working through that with individual schools.
I'll just say, yesterday I met with our learning community superintendents just to really talk through some of the different options that they were looking at, just to really be sure that we were aligned on all the safety protocols, and that each school is working through those distancing protocols right now, and regarding how they're going to move between classes, et cetera.
So Dr. Johnson, since you are a parent in the district, what option are you choosing for your child?
Yeah, so my son is going to HCS at home in his school. He's going to school. And that's all things being, equal as they are. We intend for my son to go to school. And so, I think as a parent, again, I encourage parents, and as I've, bumped into parents in different places and spaces, I've just tried to share, some of what I'm doing. And it really hit me, I think a couple of weeks ago, as we were, kind of finalizing where we thought we needed to be. That I needed at home to do some work with my son around what the return to school is going to look like, and begin to have that conversation. And so I remember vividly, we were getting out of the truck, going in the gas station, and he was just darting out, getting ready to go in and get a drink or whatever it was. And I said, "Hey bud, get your mask." And he's like, "Oh Dad." And I said, No, get your mask. I said, "Let me tell you, school's getting ready to start, and here in a little bit, and you're going to have to wear your mask every day." He's like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you're going to have to wear your mask every day." And so, really, we've it just, again, person in my household, he's come a long way with that, and understanding, okay, this is just a part of what I do, and a lot less grumbling and groaning and moaning around it. And we know there's going to be some adjustment in that regard for students. I think it's going to be interesting for like the 5th through the 8th grade. I was at a REACH program on Monday. There was a rising 5th grader that was getting out, a young man, and his kind of issue with the mask is it wasn't cool. I don't know if it didn't match his outfit or what the deal was, but he was like, "Yeah, just saying, it's not cool." So he put it on and was fine. And so we're just going to have to continue to normalize that, because I want to be clear. Like our goal is to have absolutely as many students at school as we possibly can, and to not have to completely shut down or move to not having school. And so that's our goal, and also even more importantly is to keep everybody healthy, and so the best way to mitigate against that is to keep students and teachers and leaders in face coverings.
Could you provide more information about Hamilton County Virtual School? Are parents given resources, or are they strictly on their own?
So there's some level of resource, and I'll let Neely, I see Neely's face on here. Neely can talk a little bit about, virtual. I will just say, that if when we look at virtual, virtual is an option that is necessary, but we've used it out of necessity, and so for student situations. And so, even in my former district, as a high school principal, every now and then there may be a situation where a young lady has become pregnant. I'm thinking of a specific situation where a young lady had become pregnant. The baby that she had some health issues, and there were going to have to be like regular trips to the doctor. And so, just coming to school in the traditional way was not going to work for her anymore. And so we had to support her with the virtual option. And so we try to, we obviously need that option because situations do happen, whether it's medically related or whatever. But the HSS at home looks different. Neely, you may want to speak to that a little bit in regards to virtual versus.
So virtual school is probably the most independent program we could offer. And what I mean by that is once you sign on to be in virtual school, and I don't know if many of you have heard of virtual programs like K-12. There's a program literally called K-12 Virtual School. There's a program called Compass. Many different companies run virtual schools. And so what a student would do is just log on for the courses they are assigned, and they would literally engage with a teacher through their computer for however many hours. And then our part in that from Hamilton County side is we assign a teacher on a minimal contract to just keep up with attendance and assignments. It is probably, as far as a parent would have to really be a little bit more on top of their student at home because the company that offers virtual may be outside of Hamilton County. It's literally a program that we align with so that those instructors give the teaching. The teachers that follow up are associated with Hamilton County, but not those that typically offer the program. So once you're aligned with Hamilton County Virtual, you sign on, you get your instruction through the computer, a teacher on the screen, and then go from there. There is a connection to Hamilton County through our virtual school, but it's very different, and it is probably the most self-directed program we could offer. That's why we worked so hard to create our own version of an option where a student could stay engaged with their base school and a teacher and a class at their school. So I hope that helps as parents are making a decision. But it would require a lot more self-direction and a lot more follow-up probably at home than any of the options we could give.
When will parents know what group they are assigned to for phase 2?
Sorry, say that first part again, Jenny.
When will families know what group they are assigned to for phase 2?
Yeah, so I would say it's probably gonna be a couple of weeks. Maybe it probably will be the end of July, first of all. And here's the why behind that. Normally speaking, obviously we're not in this situation at all. Normally speaking, for the most part, about 90-95% of student assignment work is done, and so we know where students are going. We know what school they're going to be in. Obviously, the grade, that doesn't matter either way, but you know where they're going to be and what options are there, because most of our kids are going to come to school. And so obviously with us giving the option of parents really choosing and trying to give choice with HSS at home, we've given until July the 22nd. And so schools won't have full clarity on exactly what every parent is doing until that July 22nd. And then once they have that information, it's going to take them, probably somewhere between 7 and 14 days to finish putting their schedules together. And so we're looking at, the 1st of August, probably before all of that's solidified. But I will say, if there's any thoughts, that the determining of groups is really a flip of the switch to say you're in group A, you're in group B, and trying to navigate that way.
Our next question is, why is it not required for K-2 students to wear a mask?
Yeah, Keith, you want to talk, or Colonel, you want to talk a little bit about K-2, and it is recommended, not required. And I think I mentioned that, and Justin may want to speak to this some too. We are in the process of buying some barriers and doing some things like that. But Keith, you want to talk a little about the thought process and how we got there?
Yeah, so one of the things when we were going through looking at the mask opportunity, let me just say, Dr. Johnson's emphasized it. One of the reasons we, after a lot of consultation, made the recommendation that we go with a mask in phase 3. It's really, we want to do everything we can to stay in school. And we think that gives us the best opportunities to really kind of help slow the spread in the county, but also to keep us in school. So when we looked at K2, again, we deferred to expertise. We had on our task force, a couple of local doctors, one affiliated with Children's Hospital at Erlanger, plus the health department. And again, about the time as we were having this discussion, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out their report. And one of the things that they recommended or that they discussed in their report is that there's a certain point where younger children, that their fingers and hands on their face dealing with a mask creates just as much problem as not wearing a mask. So we had a lot of discussion around this and decided that we would recommend masks for K2. We will be providing barriers. Justin may want to elaborate on that, but we will be providing dividers for, a lot of our classrooms have tables. So we're going to be providing dividers so that there's some social distancing between the children. And we're going to encourage, just like Dr. Johnson's doing with his son, we're going to encourage parents to really try to acclimate their K through student to masks. I know my son and his wife are doing the same thing with their kindergarten. So really trying to, at the same time, give people as much protection, but recognizing that there are situations, especially with the K through 2 students, that they could actually be creating more harm with a mask because of their hands on their face playing with the mask or fiddling with the mask is problematic.
I don't know that I have much more to add, Keith, other than, we'll look at the barriers for pretty specific situations. For example, speech and language pathologist or, a teacher that's maybe working with exceptional ed students in a small group. So we are looking at procuring those, and we'll have those ready August 12th.
Our next question is, in the Group AB schedule for kids who are in SACC on their off days, will there be enough staff to help elementary kids access online learning requirements for their at-home days?
Yeah, so Dr. Johnson, I'll grab that if you want me to. So the SACC, we're trying to set up 10 sites and working through the specific sites now. And we'll set those up for kind of a first choice for our staff, and then open it up to the public from there. We'll still be in really small groups this summer. In SACC, we're at a 10-to-1 staff to student ratio, and so I definitely think there's going to be support there to help students with the online learning. Now we need to be honest about that. It's not a teacher. And so it won't be like they're sitting in school getting that instruction, but there will be staff to help them log on if they've got, if they're stumbling on a math problem, help them do a little bit of the math problem. And we'll set up some times where, there will be set aside time to do the school work, and then some set aside time to play and get outside. But we are working through that, should have those 10 sites in the next coming weeks. Neely Parker reminded me of this yesterday. We're also working with some community partners, for example, like the Girls and Boys Club and some of the youth and family development centers, to provide alternative sites also for childcare on those days if we're in phase 2. So trying to make sure that we've got as many options for families with 2 parents at home, or one parent at home that has to go to work to provide some options for childcare for your kids. So we're working on that. We'll have information soon.
A follow-up to that question is there an idea about cost for SACC?
So trying to think what this summer it was for a non-employee's child. It was $75 a week. So I can't do that math in my head very fast, but for $75 for a week, and again, it's open from 6 to 6. That's a pretty good price. For employees would get half off of that, and so it would be $37.50 a week, and we would stick with those prices. And again, I want to be clear, SACC is not a money maker. It's basically a self-funded portion of our budget where the money that comes in goes to pay for the employees and the supplies that they need. So it's a budget neutral thing for us. It's not something that we're making money on, but it is $75 a week for students, and then for employees' kids, it's $37.50.
Our next question is there a plan for X-Ed if we open in phase 2? A lot of classes are small and self-contained. Would they be able to go 5 days a week, even in phase 2, due to the low numbers?
I see Mitzi Delcro, and I don't know if Garfield is on here. Mitzi may want to chime in. I know that we have some homebound opportunity that we absolutely provided. Mitzi, you want to chime in?
Sure. Good morning. We have discussed this in the special ed department in our meetings, and we've talked about having alternative schedules for the students who are alternatives to the 2-day schedule. So we're working on seeing how that would work in light of the building getting cleaned and those sorts of things. But that is something that we have under consideration and are working on how that would look at each individual schools.
Okay, our next question is how will outdoor classrooms be used?
Yeah, we are. I'm very careful about really. We are encouraging schools to think about ventilation, spaces for ventilation, and so I'll kind of leave it at that. So I would anticipate schools looking at more outdoor opportunities. And I want to leave it at that because of safety and well-being of students, but we're absolutely encouraging that.
Our next question is, will students in option 2 be on the same pace as students in option 1? For example, at-home students be placed in a cohort for AB schedule when in-person students are in phase 2?
Yeah, so read that question one more time. I want to make sure I captured.
So there are 2 parts to it. So will students in option 2 be on the same pace as students in option 1? And the second part of the question is asking that, so when we're in phase 2 and the in-person students are on an AB schedule, will the at-home students also be on an AB schedule to keep them on pace together?
So the answer to all of it is yes, but it's nuanced. And so the option A and option B, as well as HCS at home, like they'll keep their cadence. If we're in a phase 2, they'll keep their cadence throughout the course of the semester in regards. So yes, option 1 versus option 2. I'm assuming you're speaking to the phases versus the HCS at home, and if that's the question, the pace will look very, very similar. You can go across our district and, if it's 4th grade, most of our teachers are within a handful of days of each other in regards to their pacing, in regards to what's being taught and what's being instructed for the respective content areas. And so, yeah, absolutely.
So we only have time for one more question, and there were a lot of questions in this session, and if yours was not answered, I'm going to put an email address in the chat box for everybody. We've set up an inbox specifically for reopening questions, and we have a team ready to answer those questions for you. So our last question is, how will social distancing happen in the classroom during phase 3?
During phase 3, yeah. So I think a couple things are going to come into play. Obviously, thing one is we will have a portion of our community that determines that HCS at home is an option that they desire, and so that will create less less students, generally speaking, in the school. That's part A to it. Part B is that the reality is, and full disclosure, we want to do our very best to socially distance. We are limited in space, and so procedurally at the school level, working with principals on what can we do to really try to limit spaces, even rethinking classrooms, and traditionally, if I had a class that, maybe had more students in it because of what was being offered, do I need to be thinking about a different classroom? What kind of things like that do I need to be doing? And then, again, I go back to the importance of mask as well. I think masks are going to be critically important because it's just gonna come into play. So I think HCS at home is going to help. I believe that obviously schools are working through how do we make sure that our teaching classes are in spaces that allow for more distancing. As another note, one of the things I know schools are working through and looking at is even with school nurses. Our school nurses have traditionally been in sometimes almost a closet, and so we're trying to think through how do we get our nurses in larger spaces to try to help mitigate, against the spread. So all those are things that we're consistently working through, and we'll work through here over the next month as we get ready to open the doors. I think that is it for now. I really appreciate you all joining this morning. You're the early birds, and our first time trying to do a town hall first thing in the morning. But again, we're trying to accommodate as many parents as possible. I believe that Kate Skonberg over our community work is popped the town hall schedule in. You can feel free to join another one. Or again, as was shared by Jenny, you can put any questions you had in the chat box. And again, I just want to remind everybody, I won't pull it back up, but it really is for us. We want to make sure that we provide choice for families. We definitely want to do that. We want you to remember that this situation is extremely fluid, and we're continuing to get information on a daily basis. And we ask that our community continue to show grace to us as a system, but to each other. This is a very challenging time for families and parents, and frankly, as a nation, it's been a very challenging time. And so we will get through this together. We appreciate your input and support as we continue to work to try to get schools reopened. So thank you again for joining us this morning, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.